The Zapirian war fleet hung in the void like a constellation of dying stars. Commander Zakel watched from the crystalline bridge of the resplendent clarity, his four-jointed fingers resting against the bioluminescent command console. The ship's translucent walls pulsed with the slow, fading heartbeat of their failing power cores, blue-green energy flickering like the last embers of a fire. Around him, the crew moved with the quiet desperation of those who knew they were already dead. The Zenthari swarm was coming. They had devoured 3 systems already, their black tendrils of living metal and ravenous nanites consuming everything in their path. The Zapirian High Council had ordered a full retreat, abandoning their outer colonies in a desperate bid to save the core worlds. But Zakel knew the truth. There was no outrunning the swarm, not without a miracle, and then the gate activated. It was a single jump node flickering to life at the edge of the system. Unauthorized, unannounced, its energy signature all wrong. The Zapirian scanners shrieked in protest as the anomaly tore through local space, its structure too crude, too primitive to belong to any known galactic power. Commander, Scientist Quilex. Voice crackled through the neural link, his bioluminescent crest flaring in alarm. That gate. It shouldn't exist. The energy readings are? Zakel silenced him with a gesture, his faceted eyes narrowing. The gate wasn't just unstable, it was human. He remembered them, the hairless, soft-skinned creatures from the third rock of Sol. Decades ago, a Zapirian scout had pulled one of their kind from a wrecked vessel, saving a single life out of nothing but protocol. The human had babbled gratitude in their guttural tongue, promising repayment. The Zapirians had dismissed it as sentimentality. The gate flared, its aperture shuddering as something forced its way through. Not a warship, not a fleet, a single battered human frigate. Zakel's mandibles twitched in disbelief. The vessel was a relic by galactic standards, its hull patched with crude alloys, its engines belching plasma like an afterthought. It had no crystalline elegance, no bioluminescent grace, just blunt angles and scorched metal, drifting toward them like a lost child. Then the comms crackled to life. Zapirian fleet. Came the voice, a human female, her words translated, but her tone unmistakable, calm, resolved. This is Major Helen Felger of the Terran Defense Initiative. We received your distress signal. A distress signal? Zakel's spines flattened in shock. They had sent no such call. The swarm had jammed all outgoing transmissions weeks ago, unless the humans had been listening anyway. Quilex hissed beside him. They can't possibly think one ship will make a difference. Zakel didn't answer. Because the human vessel wasn't stopping, it was accelerating. Straight toward the swarm's advanced scouts, the Zapirian command, Nexus hummed with the low, pulsing glow of bioluminescent panels, casting eerie blue, green shadows across the crystalline walls. Zakel's claws flexed against the smooth surface of the tactical display. His compound eyes locked onto the crude human vessel, now streaking toward the swarm's vanguard. It was suicide. The swarm's advanced scouts were living warships, chitinous monstrosities with plasma, searing mandibles and adaptive shielding. A single one had torn through 3 Zapirian cruisers before being overwhelmed. And yet, this human ship, this patchwork relic, charged forward as if it had every right to be there. Quilex's antennae flicked in agitation beside him. They must be malfunctioning or insane. Zakel didn't respond. His mind raced through the implications. The humans had heard them, not through official channels. Those had been dead for weeks, but through some other means. Listening when they shouldn't have been able to, watching when they hadn't been invited, and now they were here. The tactical display flickered as the human ship, designated TDI Resolute, crossed into engagement range. Swarm scouts pivoted, their organic weapon arrays glowing with building energy. Then the Resolute did something impossible. Not a hull breach, not an explosion, a controlled, deliberate separation, like a seed pod bursting open. Sections of its armored plating detached, unfolding into a swarm of smaller craft, each one maneuvering with terrifying precision. Quilex's mandibles parted in shock. They built their ship to come apart. Zackel's spines bristled. Not just come apart, reconfigure. The central core of the Resolute remained, now streamlined, its engines flaring brighter as it juked between swarm plasma bursts. The detached modules, drones, fighters, something else, swarmed outward, harrying the scouts, drawing fire, distracting. One of the swarm scouts shuddered as a human drone latched onto its underbelly, detonating in a burst of white-hot shrapnel. Another reeled as the Resolute's railgun, crude by Zapirian standards, punched through its organic armor with terrifying efficiency. Zackel's blood ran cold. The humans weren't just fighting, they were hunting, and then the comms crackled again. Zapirian fleet. Major Felger's voice came through, calm as deep space. We're clearing you a path. Suggest you follow before they regroup. Quilex turned to him, antennae rigid with disbelief. They're ordering us. Zackel stared at the display, at the wreckage of swarm scouts, at the human ship already pivoting toward the next wave, not ordering, and for the first time in centuries, a Zapirian high commander felt something unfamiliar. The Resolute burned through the void like a blade through silk, its engines flaring with unnatural precision. Zackel watched, his crystalline fingers tightening around the command rail as the human vessel executed maneuvers that should have torn any Zapirian ship apart. Their thrusters fired in microbursts, their hull twisting mid-course, not with the elegant calculated arcs of bioluminescent drives, but with the brutal efficiency of something made for war. Quilex's antennae flickered erratically beside him, her normally composed voice strained. Their inertial dampeners, they shouldn't be able to sustain those vectors without liquefying their crew. Zackel didn't answer. His eyes were locked on the tactical display, where the human ship carved a path through the swarm's flank, its point defense systems shredding incoming drones with contemptuous ease. The Resolute wasn't just evading, it was dictating the engagement, forcing the swarm into kill zones, herding them like prey. And then the humans did something worse. A secondary bay on the Resolute's underbelly eyrised open, and a sleek, angular craft slid free, no larger than a Zapirian interceptor, but built with a lethality that made Zackel's carapace prickle. It accelerated faster than anything crystalline tech could achieve, its thrusters leaving no ion trail, no energy signature, just silence. Quilex's mandibles parted in shock. Stealth coding, but that's impossible at those velocities. The craft banked, vanishing from sensors entirely before reappearing inside the swarm's formation. A pulse of violet light flared from its prow, and 3 swarm vessels disintegrated, their organic hulls unraveling like frayed thread. Zackel's mind raced. The humans had cloaking tech, not the crude energy, dispersing shroud the Zapirians used, but true invisibility, undetectable even to the swarm's bioscanners, and they had just revealed it without hesitation. A message blinked onto his console. Felger, HFY Zapirian Command. You're clear to jump. Well, hold the line, Quilex hissed. They expect us to flee while they die. Zackel stared at the words, his mind clawing through centuries of doctrine. The Zapirian consensus had protocols for first contact, cautious observation, measured exchanges, control, but the humans had bypassed all of it. They had seen an enemy, assessed a threat, and acted, not for conquest, not for negotiation, because it was right. His carapace ached with the weight of the realization. The humans weren't just advanced, they were unpredictable, and worse, they were kind. The swarm regrouped, their vessels pulsing with renewed fury. The Resolute pivoted to meet them, its railguns charging. Zackel made his decision. Signal the fleet, he said, his voice quieter than he expected. Prepare to jump. Quilex whirled on him. You can't be serious. We owe them. I know, Zackel interrupted. his claws flexed. "Which is why we must go. Because if the humans could do this with one ship, what would they do with a debt?" The jump gate flared to life ahead, its blue-green light washing over the bridge. Behind them, the Resolute opened fire. Section Fe, the gift that breaks physics. The jump gate shimmered like fractured light through a prism, its crystalline edges humming with contained energy. Zapple watched the Resolute through the viewport, watched as its railguns carved glowing scars through the swarm's formations, each impact sending ripples of superheated plasma through the void. The human ship moved with a fluid, almost organic precision, its maneuvers too fast, too alive for something so massive. Quilex's antennae trembled as he analyzed the data streaming across his console. "Their kinetics," his voice hitched. "They're not just accelerating projectiles, they're bending space around them." Zapple's claws dug into the command chair. Impossible. Only the oldest of the galactic core species had mastered such technology, and even then, it required power cores the size of moons. Yet the humans had crammed it into a single warship. A proximity alert blared. The swarm's reinforcements were emerging from the system's dark zone. Dozens of sickle-shaped cruisers, their hulls pulsing with the sickly violet bioluminescence of their hive. Mind link. The Resolute pivoted, its thrusters flaring crimson as it repositioned between the Zapirian fleet and the incoming wave. No demands, no negotiations, just protection. Quilex's mandibles clicked in disbelief. They're not even shielding their own flanks. Zapple understood. The humans weren't just fighting, they were sacrificing. A transmission flickered to life on the main display. Major Helen Felger's face, streaked with soot, her eyes sharp despite the fatigue lining them. "Zapirian Command," she said, her voice rough but steady. "We're holding the line, but you need to go." Behind her, the bridge of the Resolute was a storm of activity. Crews shouting over the din of alarms, sparks raining from overloaded conduits. A young officer, Davis, yanked a smoldering panel free with his bare hands, his sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms crisscrossed with old scars. Zapple hesitated. The Zapirian way was calculation, efficiency, survival at all costs. The human way was fire. He opened a fleet-wide channel. "All vessels, prepare for jump." Quilex stiffened. "We can't just look at them," Zapple hissed, gesturing to the screen. The Resolute's railguns fired again, this time in a staggered sequence. Each shot timed to exploit the swarm's regrouping patterns. They know what they're doing, and they're doing it for us. The jump gate's light intensified, its crystalline lattice flaring as the Zapirian ships aligned. A new signal cut through the chaos. A single data packet, unencrypted, broadcasting on every frequency. Quilex decrypted it first. His carapace went pale. It was a schematic, human FTL technology. Not the theoretical scraps the Galactic Senate hoarded, not the half-functional relics traded in backwater systems. Complete, unrestricted Zapple's mind reeled. This wasn't just a weapon. It was a key, one that shattered every law of controlled advancement the galaxy had ever enforced, and the humans had given it to them. The Resolute's engines flared as it surged forward to meet the swarm's next wave. The jump gate swallowed the Zapirian fleet whole. Behind them, the humans fought on. The jump gate's light collapsed behind them, like a dying star, its crystalline lattice folding into itself, with a final, reverberating hum. Zapple's command vessel, the luminous will, shuddered as it re-entered real space. But the silence that followed was worse than the chaos they had left behind. The bridge was bathed in the dim, pulsing glow of Zapirian bio. Luminescence, the usual rhythmic hum of their crystalline cores now erratic, flickering like a wounded heartbeat. Zapple's claws tightened around the command spire, the smooth organic metal, cool beneath his grip. His secondary eyes, normally scanning multiple data streams, were locked on the single schematic, still glowing on the central display. Quilex stood frozen beside him, his carapace plates shifting in a subconscious ripple of distress. The schematic wasn't just a gift, it was a reckoning. Every line of code, every energy modulation curve, it was elegant, brutally efficient, not the patchwork of scavenged galactic tech the Senate assumed humans relied on, but something refined, as if they had stripped the concept of faster than light traveled down to its bones and rebuilt it from first principles, and they had handed it over without hesitation. Zakel's mandibles twitched. The humans had known that the Zapirian fleet, for all their crystalline warships and bioluminescent weaponry, were losing. Known that the swarm would have torn through their last defensive line in hours known, and instead of bartering, instead of demanding tribute or territory in exchange for salvation, they had simply given them the means to escape. The schematic included modifications, adaptations. The humans had tailored their own FTL system to integrate seamlessly with Zapirian crystalline cores, as if they had studied their technology in depth, not just observed it, but understood it. A chill ran through Zakel's thorax. How long had the humans been watching them? The bridge comms crackled to life. A priority channel, encrypted, but not with any Zapirian cipher. The signal was tight, efficient, carrying none of the harmonic resonance typical of galactic transmissions. Zakel hesitated only a moment before accepting. The holographic display shimmered, resolving into the face of Major Helen Felger. Her expression was calm, but her eyes, those unnerving, depthless human eyes, burned with something that made Zakel's instincts recoil. Not hostility, not even pity. "Commander," she said, her voice steady, "you're clear of the swarm's pursuit vector. For now." Zakel's spines flexed. "You gave us your FTL, a flicker of something, amusement," passed over Felger's face. "We did, no explanation, no conditions." Quilek stepped forward, his voice uncharacteristically unsteady. "This technology, it violates every galactic containment protocol. The Senate will." Felger cut him off with a glance. "The Senate," she said, "isn't here." The weight of it pressed down like a collapsing star. Zakel understood, then. This wasn't just a rescue. It was a test. The humans had known the Zapirians would take the schematic, known they would use it, and in doing so, they had forced the galaxy's hand. Because now, there was no going back. Felger's image flickered as the transmission destabilized, whether from interference or deliberate severance, Zakel couldn't tell. Her final words were quiet, almost gentle. "Run if you want, but when you're ready, we'll be waiting." The channel died. On the view screen, the void stretched endlessly, cold and indifferent. Behind them, light years away, the humans were still fighting. Alone, Zakel turned to Quilek. The scientist's carapace had darkened with realization. They had been given a choice, and for the first time in their history, the Zapirians had no idea what to do with it. The silence on the luminous Wills Bridge was absolute. Not the quiet of contemplation, but the hollow stillness of a species realizing, for the first time, that they had been measured and found wanting. Zakel's claws flexed against the command console, the faint hum of the ship's crystalline core the only sound. The schematic, their schematic, the one they had taken from the humans, still pulsed on the main display, its data streams shifting like liquid mercury. It was perfect, too perfect. Every line of code, every energy matrix, every fail, safe was flawless. And that was the problem. Because the Zapirians had spent centuries refining their bioluminescent technology, their living crystal constructs, their elegant organic energy flows. They had prided themselves on being the galaxy's foremost engineers. This human design, this gift, was beyond them. Quilek stood motionless beside him, his antennae twitching in distress. His carapace, usually a vibrant teal, had dulled to a sickly gray-green. He didn't need to speak. The truth was written in the way his claws trembled as he scrolled through the data. "We could not have built this, not in a decade, not in a century. And yet the humans had handed it over as if it were nothing. Zackel's mandibles tightened. That was the second revelation, the one that cut deeper than the first. The humans had not just surpassed them. They had let the Zapirians believe they were ahead. For how long? The question slithered through his mind like a parasite. How many of their discoveries had been nudged into place by unseen hands? How many of their triumphs had been allowed? The view screen flickered, pulling him from the spiral. The void outside was no longer empty. At first, it was just a distortion, a ripple in the fabric of space, subtle as a breath against glass. Then the stars warped, bending around something vast and unseen. They emerged without fanfare, without the telltale flare of jump signatures. One moment, there was nothing. The next, the darkness was alive with angular, brutalist silhouettes, their hulls matte, black, and studded with weapon ports. Human vessels, dozens of them, hundreds, Zackles, secondary heart stuttered. They were everywhere, not just in this system, but on the scanners, the long-range sensors, clustered around every Zapirian colony, every outpost, every world, a net drawn tight around an empire that hadn't even known it was being watched. Quilex made a sound like a dying reactor. They were here, he whispered, the whole time. And then the transmissions began, not from the ships, from the planets, Zapirian colonies, their comms suddenly alive with human signals, not conquest, not demands, but offers, reinforcements, as if they had been waiting in the shadows for this exact moment. Zackel's carapace felt too small. This wasn't rescue. It was revelation. The humans had never been the desperate, fractured species. The galaxy believed they had been the unseen empire, and they had just shown their hand. The bridge of the luminous will hummed with a tension so thick Zackel could taste it, sharp and metallic, like the air before a storm. The holographic displays painted the command deck in shifting hues of blue and silver. But now they flickered with unfamiliar crimson markers. Human fleet positions, their vectors tracing a web of control across Zapirian space. Zackel's claws flexed against the command console, the living crystal surface pulsing faintly beneath his touch. He had spent his life studying war, mastering the elegant precision of Zapirian tactics, the way their crystalline fleets moved in perfect harmony, their energy lances cutting through the void like beams of pure geometry. But this was something else. The humans hadn't just hidden, they had infiltrated. Quilex's antennae trembled as he parsed the data streams. Their ships, they were never in deep space, he murmured, voice brittle with disbelief. They were inside our trade lanes, our comm relays. Their signatures masked as debris, as sensor ghosts. His voice cracked. They lived in our blind spots. Zackel's secondary heart thrummed faster. It wasn't just the scale of their deception. It was the patience. The humans had waited, silent and unseen, while the galaxy dismissed them as fractured, as primitive. While the Zapirian High Council debated whether to offer them protectorate status or quarantine. And now, as the Vordax swarm devoured Zapirian worlds, the humans had stepped from the shadows, not as saviors, but as something far more terrifying. The main display flickered, resolving into a live feed from the nearest human battleship. Its hull was a matte abyss, swallowing light rather than reflecting it, its angular contours studded with weapon ports that glowed a dull, ominous red. No Zapirian vessel had ever looked like that. Their ships were luminous, elegant, meant to be seen. This thing was built to disappear. A transmission alert chimed. Zackel hesitated, then opened the channel. The human commander who appeared on screen wore no ceremonial garb, no insignia of rank beyond a simple black uniform. Major Helen Felger, according to the data tags. Her face was unreadable, her eyes dark and assessing. "Commander Zackel," she said, her voice calm, measured. "We've begun deploying medical teams to your colonies under attack. Your people won't hold the line alone. Not we're here to help. Not you're welcome." Just a statement of fact. Zackel's mandibles tightened. You've been watching us. Felger didn't blink. Yes. No apology. No justification. Quilex made a strangled noise beside him. You let the Vordax hit us first, to prove a point. Felger's gaze shifted to him, and for the first time something flickered in her expression. Understanding. You never saw us as a threat, she said quietly. Now you do. The screen went dark. Zackel stared at the empty space where her image had been, his mind racing. The humans hadn't just hidden their strength. They had weaponized being overlooked. They had let the galaxy believe they were weak, fractured, until the moment they chose to reveal otherwise. And now, as the Vordax swarm met an enemy they hadn't accounted for, as human warships materialized from the void, with terrifying precision, Zackel realized the truth. The humans hadn't just come to repay a debt. They had come to teach the galaxy a lesson. Zackel's crystalline command chamber pulsed with the dim, rhythmic glow of emergency lighting, the blue-green luminescence casting jagged reflections across the translucent walls. The air hummed with the low-frequency vibration of distant detonations. The Vordax swarm's assault, still hammering against the outer defenses. But now, something else had joined the battle. Human ships, not the scattered, desperate vessels the Zapirian intelligence reports had described, not the fragile, jury-rigged craft of a species barely clinging to survival. These were monsters of war, sleek and brutal, their hulls dark as void, forged iron, their weapon arrays unfolding like the wings of some ancient predator. Quilex's antennae trembled as he parsed the tactical feed, his chitinous fingers darting across the holographic display. They're everywhere, he whispered. Not just the jump gate. They flanked the entire Vordax formation. Zackel's secondary eyes flickered in disbelief. The humans had not simply arrived. They had ambushed the ambushers. The Vordax swarm, a force that had torn through 3-star systems without resistance, now found itself caught in a pincer movement of terrifying efficiency. And the humans moved wrong. Zapirian doctrine favored elegant, crystalline precision, calculated strikes. Energy lances fired in harmonic resonance. The Vordax relied on overwhelming numbers, a tide of chitin and plasma. But the humans, they fought like fire. A human cruiser designation Iron Resolve slammed into the heart of the Vordax vanguard, its forward railguns spitting hypervelocity slugs that punched clean through the swarm's organic armor. Secondary batteries unleashed a storm of plasma clusters, detonating in chain reactions that turned entire squadrons into expanding clouds of molten debris. And then came the boarding pods. Zackel's mandibles parted in horror as the human assault craft burrowed into Vordax hulls, their drills screaming through reinforced chitin like it was wet parchment. Inside, something worse waited. Figures clad in blackened exosuits, their movements too fast, too fluid. They didn't just kill, they hunted. Quilex's voice was hollow. They're using our tactics against them. Because that was the true horror. The humans had studied the Vordax. Yes, but they had studied the Zapirians too. Their maneuvers echoed crystalline battle patterns, refined and twisted into something sharper, more vicious. They fought like a mirror held up to the galaxy's greatest warriors, and then shattered it. A new transmission flickered to life on the main display. Major Felger's face appeared, her expression unreadable. Zackel, your homeworld's orbital defenses are failing. The swarm's main fleet is breaking through. Zackel's blood ran cold. He had expected demands, ultimatums. Instead, Felger tilted her head slightly, as if listening to a distant voice. Then she said, quietly, "Tell your people to brace for impact." The screen cut to an external feed. Something was coming, something impossible. A human warship, larger than anything their records had ever documented, dropped out of warp directly above the Zapirian homeworld. Its hull was scarred, ancient, its armor pitted with the remnants of battles fought long before the Zapirians had ever looked to the stars. And it was falling, not crashing, not breaking apart. Falling with purpose. Quilek's voice cracked. They're ramming the Vordax command ship. Zackle could only watch as the human vessel, its engines flaring in final defiance, drove itself like a spear into the heart of the swarm. The detonation lit up the sky, a second sun blooming in the darkness. The Vordax lines buckled. The humans hadn't just repaid their debt. They had turned the Zapirian's own annihilation into a trap and sprung it with the weight of a dying starship. The explosion still burned in Zackle's vision, seared into his retinas like a brand. The human warship, their warship, had torn through the Vordax command vessel like a blade through flesh, its death throes igniting a chain reaction that rippled through the swarm's formation. Ships that had been moments from glassing the Zapirian homeworld now floundered, their crystalline command structures shattered, their formations collapsing into chaos. But it wasn't enough. The Vordax were legion. For every ship that detonated in the wake of the human strike, 3 more pulsed forward, their bioluminescent hulls flickering with renewed malice. The swarm did not retreat. It adapted. Zackle's mandibles twitched, his neural tendrils pulsing with frantic calculations. The humans had bought them time, precious, desperate seconds. But the Zapirian fleet was still outnumbered, their energy reserves dwindling. Then the comms crackled, not the open channels, not the emergency frequencies, a signal so faint, so carefully hidden, that it bypassed the Vordax jamming fields entirely. Zackle's secondary heart stuttered as the transmission resolved, a human voice. Calm, methodical, Zapirian command. This is Major Felger. You are not alone. The words were simple. The implications were not. Because the humans had not just sent a single ship, they had sent a message, and the galaxy had been listening. Quilek's claws trembled as he decrypted the data packet attached to the transmission. His crystalline interface flared, projecting a star map into the air, one that should not have existed. The Vordax swarm's movements, their staging points, their supply lines, all laid bare. But more than that, signatures, dozens of them. Hundreds, human vessels, scattered across the sector, hidden in asteroid belts, drifting in the debris fields of dead stars, lurking in the gravitational shadows of gas giants. Not warships, not yet. Each one whispering back to a network older than the Zapirian first contact. A network built not on open alliances, but on debts. Favors, the quiet understanding that no species truly stood alone in the dark. Quilek's breath caught. The humans had not come to save them. They had come to call. On the bridge of the crippled indomitable Major Helen Felger watched the tactical display with grim satisfaction. The Zapirians had saved one human life. Once, a single act of mercy in a universe that had long since forgotten the word. And humanity remembered. The first response came from the Tarkassi freeholds, a ragged coalition of mercenary clans who had once fought beside human privateers. Their ships were fast, their weapons crude, but they fell upon the Vordax flank like starving wolves. Then the Luran collective answered, their sleek, silvered vessels slipping out of warp with eerie precision. They owed the humans nothing, but they had watched, and they had learned. One by one, the whispers became a roar. Zackle's neural tendrils burned with the weight of it. The humans had not just thrown themselves into the fire. They had lit the signal, and the galaxy had come. The void between stars burned with the light of 100 answering calls. Zackle's crystalline command spire flickered with emergency lighting. Its once pristine luminescent panels now cracked and dim. The Vordax armada, so confident in their annihilation of the Zapirian homeworld, now found themselves caught in a storm they had not foreseen. Humanity had not come alone. The indomitable, its hull scarred and bleeding atmosphere, hung like a broken spear at the heart of the battle. Around it, the remnants of the human fleet wove through the chaos, small, fast, relentless. But it was the others that made Zackle's neural tendrils pulse with something akin to awe. The Tarkassi ships were brutal things, their armor patched together from salvaged wrecks, and stolen tech. They fought without formation, without discipline, but with a ferocity that made even the Vordax hesitate. Their weapons were crude, their tactics reckless, but they struck like vipers, tearing into the Vordax flanks with a hunger that spoke of old debts paid in blood. Then came the Luran. Their vessels were sleek, silvered things, their hulls rippling with adaptive camouflage that made them flicker in and out of visibility. They did not broadcast their allegiance. They did not need to. Their presence alone was a statement, a silent, lethal reminder that the galaxy had been watching. And now, it had chosen its side. Quailex stood beside Zackle, his bioluminescent markings flaring with disbelief. "They owe us nothing," he murmured, his voice barely audible over the distant thunder of the battle. Zackle did not answer. He did not need to. The humans had not come for debt. They had come for justice on the Indomitable. Major Helen Felger watched the tide turn. Her fingers hovered over the tactical display, tracing the paths of the converging fleets. The Vordax had expected a slaughter. They had not expected a reckoning. Captain Rodney Davis stood at her side, his face unreadable beneath the flickering red light of the bridge. "They're breaking formation," he said quietly. Felger nodded. The Vordax were disciplined, but even they could not withstand this. The Tarkassi harried their flanks. The Luran picked apart their command ships, and the human fleet, what remained of it, refused to die. A single act of mercy decades ago. A single life saved. And now, the galaxy had answered. Felger exhaled, long and slow. The price of visibility was high, but humanity had never been afraid to pay it. The battle raged like a storm trapped in a bottle, chaotic, furious, and impossible to contain. The Vordax armada, once an unstoppable tide of crystalline warships, now fractured under the weight of their own miscalculations. Their formations, so precise moments ago, dissolved into desperate clusters as the Allied fleets carved through them. Zackle watched from the bridge of his crippled flagship, his bioluminescent veins pulsing erratically. The data streams flickering across his vision told him what his instincts already knew. They were losing, not just the battle, but the war. The Vordax had gambled on the galaxy's indifference, on the assumption that no one would rally for a dying species like the Zapirians. They had not accounted for humans. A single jump gate flickered into existence at the edge of the engagement zone, small, unassuming, its frame humming with the telltale resonance of human engineering. It was not the grand, ornate structures favored by the Vordax, or even the organic, flowing arches of Zapirian design. It was utilitarian, brutal in its simplicity. And then the gate opened, not to the expected reinforcements, not to another fleet, but to nothing. For a heartbeat, the battlefield seemed to pause, confusion rippling through both allies and enemies alike. Then the universe screamed. From the gate's maw erupted a singularity, a black hole forged not by nature but by human hands. It hung there, suspended, a perfect sphere of annihilation no larger than a frigate. The Vordax scanners shrieked in alarm as the gravitational distortions wrenched at their ships, dragging them inexorably toward the event horizon. Zackle's mandibles clicked in disbelief. The humans had not just built a weapon, they had weaponized physics itself. Quailex staggered to his side, his crystalline carapace cracked from an earlier impact. They anchored it. He rasped, his voice trembling with something between awe and terror. The gate isn't a passage, it's a tether. And then the human fleet moved, not to retreat, not to regroup, but to push. The Indomitable, its hull scorched and bleeding atmosphere, surged forward, its engines flaring white, hot as it rammed into the nearest Vordax battleship. The impact sent both vessels careening toward the singularity. Others followed. Human ships, Tarkassi raiders, even the graceful Luran skirmishers, all driving their enemies into the abyss. Felger's voice crackled over the comms, calm and final. "This is the only gate you'll ever need." The Vordax had come for extermination. Humanity had come with an answer, The Zapirian command spire trembled as the Singularity's gravity clawed at its crystalline superstructure. Zapple clung to the railing, his bioluminescent veins pulsing erratically as he watched the battle unfold through the fractured observation panels. The humans weren't just fighting, they were rewriting the battlefield. The Vordax armada, so vast it had blotted out stars, now convulsed in chaos. Their sleek, predatory ships, designed for surgical annihilation, were being herded like panicked prey toward the event horizon. The human fleet moved with terrifying coordination, their battered vessels forming an unbreakable net, forcing the enemy into the maw of their own destruction. Quilek's voice was a whisper of static over the comms. They're using the gate's own gravity well as a weapon. Zapple's neural tendrils flickered in realization. The humans hadn't just anchored the gate. They had turned it into a trap. Every Vordax ship caught in its pull was being crushed into oblivion, their hulls warping like paper in a furnace. And then he saw it. A single human dropship, its hull scorched and pitted from battle, streaked past the Zapirian spire. It wasn't retreating, it was accelerating, straight toward the Vordax command carrier inside. Major Helen Felger adjusted her grip on the controls, her fingers steady despite the tremors racking the ship. The tactical display flickered, showing the Vordax flagship, a monstrous construct of blackened alloy and pulsating void, tech anchored at the heart of the armada. "Davis," she said, her voice calm. "You ready?" Captain Rodney Davis exhaled, his breath fogging the inside of his helmet. His hands tightened around the detonator in his palm. Been ready since they glassed New Sydney. The dropship's engines roared as it punched through the Vordax defensive screen. Anti-ship batteries tore into its hull, but Felger didn't flinch. She had one job left. The Zapirian spire's sensors flared as the human vessel impacted the Vordax flagship's shields and then detonated. Not with fire, not with plasma, but with silence. A perfect sphere of darkness erupted from the point of impact, swallowing light, sound, and matter alike. The Vordax flagship's shields flickered, then collapsed inward as if sucked into a drain. The Singularity Gate's pull intensified, dragging the crippled vessel toward oblivion. Zapple's mandibles parted in shock. They just weaponized a black hole. Quilek's response was barely audible. No, they weaponized sacrifice. The human fleet, what remained of it, began to withdraw. Not in retreat, but in formation. Their ships, though broken, still moved with purpose, regrouping around the Singularity's edge, and then the comms crackled to life once more. Felger's voice, recorded, echoed across the battlefield. "This isn't just our war anymore. Welcome to the fight." The last thing Zapple saw before the Singularity swallowed the Vordax armada was the human fleet, battered, bleeding, but unbroken, holding the line. And beyond them, flickering into existence from unseen jump points, hundreds of new signatures, human reinforcements. The war had only just begun. The void between stars was never truly silent. Zapple knew this. His crystalline command chair hummed with the residual energy of the battle, its bioluminescent panels flickering erratically as the resplendent claw limped away from the Singularity's event horizon. The Zapirian flagship was a ruin, its once pristine geometric hull fractured, its organic energy conduits leaking blue, green plasma like blood from a mortal wound. But it was alive, and that, he realized with a slow, dawning horror, was entirely because of the humans. His compound eyes refocused on the tactical display. The human fleet, what remained of it, had not fled. They had anchored themselves along the gravitational boundary of the artificial black hole, their battered warships forming a bulwark against the Vordax armada's annihilation. Their sacrifice had bought time, not just for the Zapirian survivors, but for something else. Something worse. The new signatures blooming across the scanners were unmistakable. Human vessels, hundreds of them. No, thousands. They emerged from jump points with terrifying precision, their angular utilitarian silhouettes, a stark contrast to the elegant curves of Zapirian architecture. Quilek's voice was a whisper, his antennae trembling. They were waiting. Zapkal's mandibles clenched. Of course they were. The humans had not come unprepared. They had not come merely to die. They had come to win. A memory surfaced decades old, half forgotten. A single human life, saved by a Zapirian scout vessel during the early days of first contact. A mercy, given without expectation, a debt never called due. The comms crackled again, not Felger's voice this time, but another deeper, rougher, laced with the weight of command. Zapirian fleet. This is Admiral Vance of the Terran Defense Coalition. Hold position, we're taking point. Zapkal's claws dug into the armrests of his chair. The arrogance of it, the sheer, unfathomable audacity, should have infuriated him. But all he felt was a cold, creeping awe, because the humans weren't just fighting. They were returning the favor. The tactical display updated in real time as the Terran reinforcements surged forward, their formations tight, their weapons primed. Their ships were not beautiful. They were not elegant. They were brutal, asymmetrical things, built for function over form, their hulls layered with armor thick enough to make a Zapirian engineer weep. And their weapons, Zapkal's breath caught. The humans had not just matched the Vordax, they had surpassed them. Plasma lances capable of shearing through crystalline shielding, railgun batteries that fired projectiles at speeds that warped spacetime, and something new, something terrible, a weapon system the scanners could barely classify. Quilek's voice was hollow. Dive weaponized gravity itself. The first volley struck the Vordax flank like a hammer of God. Ships crumpled, shields shattered, entire battle groups were torn apart in seconds, their remains spiraling into the void. And still, the humans advanced. Zapkal watched, his mind reeling. This was not the desperate, cornered species the galaxy had dismissed. This was something else, something more. A predator, long restrained, finally unleashed, and as the Terran fleet carved through the Vordax like a blade through flesh, Zapkal understood one undeniable truth: the debt had been repaid, but the war was far from over.